Hi, everyone. Here we are kicking off the World Polkadot Forum. Thank you for everyone coming. Thank you for everyone coming early as well, depending on where you are, of course. So this is the sort of first World Polkadot Forum that we're hosting as Unit and Unit Conference. So very exciting to be kicking this off. I'm currently in Estonia at the moment, just kind of traveling around with my band as well, doing some music stuff as we're going. But I think today, what I'd like to do is just sort of take you through a little bit of my journey with Unit Network, also with Polkadot, and then do a little bit of a run through of the Unit Network platform as well, what we're building, why we're actually building it as well, which I think is pretty important. And yeah, then there can be some time for questions or a little bit of networking at the end if anyone has anything they would like to get through. So my name is Thorne Davis. I'm a co-founder at Unit Network. I do some front-end development as well, but mostly going to be focusing on UI UX designing for the application itself. As mentioned as well, I'm also a professional musician with a band called Tora. And so we're actually on tour at the moment. We just played a really beautiful set in Estonia last night. It was so awesome. And I've also founded a record label with my band called Noon, and I run a sort of small design agency alongside as well. So originally I was born in South Africa and grew up there. And when I was about 7 or 8, I moved to New Zealand and then afterwards Australia. But one thing that was very interesting, especially growing up in South Africa, was there was definitely a sense of disparity and definitely like a sense of sort of exploitation with humans and also with resources and just with just the way that the whole society was sort of structured. And I think while I was there growing up, I didn't really have as much of a clear perspective on what was going on until I actually moved to New Zealand and then Australia and was able to kind of like retroactively look at just the way that things were actually run there. And it's been a very difficult history for South Africa, as I'm sure many of you know. And so when I was sort of in my teens, my father started to get involved with some sort of like gold exchanges. He actually built one of the first sort of fiat to gold on-ramp websites way back in the day. And so I think he's, in a way, maybe I'm now sort of beginning to appreciate that he's been sort of giving me the red pill for pretty much my entire life. So it's almost like a pretty natural progression that I think I ended up here in the crypto space. But I think one of the really big takeaways for me was that perspective really does sort of drive possibility. And I think once I began to realize that a lot of the systems that are currently active at this point in time, they don't necessarily need to stay that way. You know, I think for a lot of people, if we look at, say, monetary systems or if we look at social systems, we think that these kind of have existed for a very long time and are probably going to exist for another very long time into the future. But what I'm beginning to realize, especially over the last few years, is that this certainly is not the case. And a lot of these different systems are sort of ripe for disruption and for change. Sorry, someone's just started a lawnmower. I'm just going to close this window. That's all right. And so things really got kicked off when about 2 years ago, I actually was reading a book by an author called John Taylor Gatto. The book was called Dumbing Us Down. And he actually mentioned this book here called Tragedy and Hope, which is a very dense read. I have to admit, I'm still getting through it about 2 years later. But some of the key takeaways from this book were extremely profound, not only for matters of sort of finance, but just for matters of human history and how we actually came to be where we actually are in this day and age. And so this quote here: "The powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole." So, like, while this is pretty anti-establishment, it is to a certain extent true. And I'm not here to kind of complain about the current financial systems too much. I think the big thing for me was just that there is a possibility that they can change, as these are technologies that we're actually dealing with. And one of the very important takeaways I got from this book was that based on the distribution of technologies, like the different revolutions that have happened in human history, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the financial revolution, the arms and the military revolutions, based on how these different revolutions actually were received in different countries, based on like the order that they were received in, it had very, very profound impact on the development of that country as a whole. So, for example, India received sort of modern, quote unquote, modern weapons and transportation before it received a lot of the advances in agriculture, which had been developed in the UK. And so moving forward, we can see that how this has actually manifested itself in a country like India. And the same goes for a lot of Southeast Asia as well. And one of the, I guess the next sort of thing that I pulled out of this book was that money in itself is actually a technology. And so for a very long time, I expected, or I assumed that money just is what it is. It's going to be the way it's going to be. And this sort of like value of exchange, the social contract that we have, which is sort of like an imposition by centralized governments and therefore corruptible by the same organizations, doesn't actually have to exist in the current form that it exists in now. And so we can kind of see how it's evolved over time and has manifested differently in different places. We can see different monetary policy in different countries. This obviously had very, very far-reaching effects for those economies as a whole. But then, of course, we had something like Bitcoin, which for me was a very big turning point. Mind you, I did have this a little bit earlier, like a couple of years ago, before I was reading Tragedy and Hope. But Tragedy and Hope really just like cemented this idea for me. But Bitcoin really gave us like a sort of, at least it gave me the ability to see that there is actually a potential for a new medium of exchange, a new store of value. And so later Ethereum gave us the smart contract. And then most recently, Polkadot has kind of introduced this concept of the blockchain of blockchains. And so I think where Unit sort of fits into this is going to be the next evolution. It's going to sort of be the application built on top of these infrastructures, which really allows us to reorganize how we're actually looking at monetary systems, but also social systems, because I will have to say that blockchains are not really blockchains if there's no human participation. And I came across this wonderful quote that if it doesn't move people or doesn't move things in the real world, it's not actually really doing anything. And I think this is super important to actually note, because there is a lot of stuff happening in the Web3 and the crypto space at the moment, but when I actually have to take a very granular look at what this is actually doing for people, for society, for the betterment of the world as a whole, it's actually very difficult to actually kind of figure that out. At least maybe now, but maybe that's my naivety. So we'll see how things go. But I guess now where Unit is at is we're trying to sort of be the DAO of DAOs. So as Polkadot is the blockchain of blockchains, we've kind of zoomed in a little bit more, and we were like, okay, let's actually look at, let's take like a humanistic approach to this, and let's look at how we can adjust and reorganize humans, because a lot of the way that we interact can actually be improved now that we have these technologies and we have this ability to kind of develop things in the digital space as well. So I guess the way that we really kind of got here and the sort of solution that we're looking at is this concept of the token economy. And so for me, DAOs and tokens are sort of interoperable, because I think if you're going to make a DAO, typically you're going to have a token that is kind of there to assist with the governance of that DAO, or it's there to incentivize participation or to fund growth or whatever it is. But I will note that I think DAOs have actually existed for a long time in the world, but have just taken a slightly different form. So a friend of mine was a Buddhist monk for 10 years, and I was taking a walk with him through Central Park a few weeks ago. And he was telling me that, you know, it's very interesting because the way that the monastery was organized and all of the different monasteries around the world, it was done in very much a DAO fashion, albeit they didn't have a token, but the way that they kind of proceeded, and there was a sort of hierarchy, and there was not so much a hierarchy, but like a hierarchy of governance. There was like a way to actually kind of like solve things. And it was all happening in a very distributed fashion that wasn't so top down. And so I think now what we have with DAOs and with the technology that Web3 actually offers is we have an ability to sort of protect ourselves from ourselves, because I think so much of what has gone wrong in human history has been the corruption of a few people that has had ripple effects onto the masses. And this is another thing that I really got from the book Tragedy and Hope, which I would recommend you all read. Do try and actually find the one that's been uncensored, because I think in about the 70s, the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds actually like kind of forced a reprinting because Carroll Quigley got pretty sort of granular with how the whole banking system was actually working as well. But nevertheless, I think it's just super important that we can kind of have systems where things are going to be a little bit more transparent and things can be put, or the power can really be put into the hands of a community that really is trying to actually solve a sort of specific outcome. And as we'll see in a second, DAOs can actually be used in so many different industries, but I'm not going to be so arrogant as to say they can be used in every single industry. I think they are still going to be sort of business models and situations where a certain amount of centralization is going to make the most sense. So just a note there. But I think as far as we're going with Unit Network, we've kind of reviewed a lot of what's been happening in the crypto space and the Web3 space with tokens, with DAOs as well. And we have tried to come up with solutions to sort of speculative valuations and just really improve transparency and also tooling that allow these communities to kind of run and to sort of function. So the first thing that we have introduced here is the treasury. So the treasury is a term that gets thrown around a lot in the crypto space and definitely with different crypto projects as well. But our approach to the treasury is just a little bit different in that every single token that gets created on the Unit Network platform, as we are a tokenization platform and also a DAO creation platform, basically has access to a treasury. And so what this treasury allows users to do, or allows communities to do rather, is if they raise funding, they can actually lock crypto into their treasury, which can be transparently seen. But most importantly, the value that gets locked into the treasury is only redeemable by the people who actually have the tokens. So for example, if there's $100,000 in the treasury, and then there's 100,000 tokens in circulation, if I hold 10,000 of those tokens, I can basically go and I can actually redeem 10% of the crypto that's held in there as just like a sort of a safety net. And what this really does is it also sets a floor price. So we are hoping that this kind of mechanism is going to be adopted by pretty much every crypto project soon. Because I think once your average user actually has the understanding and the access to a tool like this, they're going to probably be a lot more careful about getting involved with projects that don't have this kind of airbag going on and don't really have a floor price, because a lot of the tokens going around, it's just speculative valuation for a lot of what's happening. Now, the second thing that we've introduced here is this, the vaults. And so the vaults are kind of like a multifaceted feature in that they facilitate decentralized wrapping. And then also it allows users on the network to stake their unit tokens to actually receive crypto loans with no margin call, with no expiry date, and with no interest or anything like that as well. So I'm not going to get too into the mechanism of how this works. I think this will actually be covered later in today's session by either Paul or Michael or Yip. But just important to note that it is there, because for me, this is like a pretty groundbreaking feature that we've added here. And then, of course, one of the most important, but perhaps the least exciting, is just going to be the tooling, which allows communities to really sort of create their own DAOs, manage their own DAOs, and do this in a way which is sort of conducive to the world of Web3. So, yep, as mentioned, this is all in one platform. So the Unit platform itself is currently live and functional. Some of the core features are very, very close to being fully launched. We're just doing a little bit of user testing and making sure that everything is absolutely perfect before we do kick things off. But here you can sort of see some screenshots of what is happening within the app. And so what we've really tried to do as well with this application is bury a lot of the complexity for the average user, because we're really looking to onboard the next million users to the crypto space. And I think a lot of them are really expecting a Web 2 experience with sort of Web3 functionality. But a lot of the people that I've met who are interested in making tokens for a myriad of different reasons have looked at other platforms like Aragon or Mirror or Third Web, and there's just a little bit too much technicality going on there. And I think maybe, I could be wrong, but maybe those platforms aren't actually designed for the average user. I think it's maybe people who are a little bit more crypto savvy and kind of know what's going on and understand some of the conventions within the Web3 space. The other important thing to note here is that every token that gets made on Unit has the same access or the same features as the Unit token itself. and one of which is a DEX. So every token that gets made, if I make a personal token, I can basically open my own DEX for that token, and therefore like allow trading as well, which is really, really cool. So as far as industries go, as I mentioned before, I think tokenization and DAOs can benefit a lot of different industries. But the one that really brought me into Unit was actually the artist and creator sort of side of things, because about 2 years ago, my bandmate and also co-founder of the record label, we were talking about a way to sort of create or to tokenize our record label, wherein the community can actually invest into the different projects, sort of crowdfunding of sorts. And they can actually earn some sort of reward or get some sort of kickback for actually helping to grow those artists. Basically, everyone becomes like a sort of a micro investor in this new world. And so this is going to have enormous knock-on effects, because if you can imagine, say the first users of Uber or the first users of Airbnb, if they were actually given some sort of like split or some sort of ownership or some sort of shares of those companies for actually being there to sort of bootstrap the growth, I think it just makes a lot of sense that they're the ones that are sort of taking the risk, and they actually do get rewarded for the effort that they're putting in as well. So as well as my band, I think in probably the next year or so, we're going to look at launching our own personal token, and we can do a sort of a round of sales to actually get the money we need to write the next album, to do the touring, to do whatever we need to do. And then we can actually be sending revenue that we're earning back into the treasury to underpin the value of the token. So it actually really connects tokens and the world of Web3 to real world businesses that actually exist. And this is the big disconnect that I think we're seeing at the moment, is that there's a lot of innovation happening in space, but it's not really like making improvements in the physical world. And for me, this is a super, super important thing, because while the digitization of all different aspects of life are happening radically, like we are still physical beings, we're going to still live and operate in this world. And so if we can find a way to sort of bridge these two, I think this is going to be very, very profound and important. So at the moment, we've got about 2,600 unit token holders. There's about 3,500 or 35,000, sorry, users on the actual platform, about 800 unique DAOs and tokens. And we do also offer crypto-backed stable tokens as well, and then city and industry tokens, which I'll leave to the other unit team to dive into a little bit later on in this forum. But just important to note, because if we look at this Venn diagram here, we can kind of see exactly how all of these different aspects interoperate. And I mean, it's potentially worth mentioning that a lot of this stuff is also dealt with by platforms like Kickstarter and Patreon and GoFundMe. But there's a lot less transparency around what's going on. And then also there's high commissions that are charged by those platforms as well. So one of the benefits of Unit for people who are looking to do similar things with crowdfunding is that it's completely free. There is no fees charged by us or by the platform or anything like that. The only fees that we do charge are fees on exchanges that take place within the platform. Now, one of the other things that we thought about doing here is that rather than just making the protocol, we really wanted to actually build up an ecosystem around the Unit network protocol. And we think that this is super important because a lot of the people that are coming into the world of Web3 do lack a little bit of the understanding. They're not so crypto native. There's a lot of conventions and terms that they're not quite familiar with. And I think there needs to be a little bit of hand-holding while we actually start to bring people into this space as well. So one of the ways that we've decided to do this was to set up these 5 different initiatives. So the first of which is Unit Conference, which basically is what we're experiencing now. It's just like a way to get people together, to share ideas, to share innovations. And then Unit Ventures, which is our launch pad that we'll be offering. It's a free launch pad as well. So for anyone that wants to make their own token or come and build their own DAO, they can basically go through this platform and they can get advice from experienced people in the crypto space on how to set their tokenomics, how to look at different business models, how they can actually just sort of structure the whole thing around what they're doing. Similarly for Unit Masters, it's a free 6-week sort of crypto cohort. We've put thousands of people through this course at the moment, and thousands more on the way as well. Each cohort is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's actually super amazing to see. And we've been getting amazing feedback. Even at some of the conferences we've been going to, a lot of the people have been approaching us, telling us that they went through the Unit Masters program and it was so enjoyable for them, and they've recommended it to other people as well. So it's very fantastic that that's actually taking on good effect. And then a little bit later on, we're going to be launching Unit University, which is basically like a research arm, which will be looking at a lot of these DAOs and tokens, assessing what is working, what is not working, how to improve, and basically just getting some, well, that sounds quite right. And just basically allowing users to get some perspective on what's actually happening, because the space is developing extremely fast. And so trying to stay on the pulse of what's going on to kind of give the most up-to-date information to our community is super important. And then of course, Unit News is just going to be sharing updates within all of these different ecosystems and from the different platform and from the protocol itself, Unit Network as well, to the whole community so that everyone can kind of stay up to speed. So as touched on earlier, with this vault, we do allow all of these different assets to basically be wrapped onto the network itself in a decentralized way. As much as I would love to get into how that mechanism works, we are sort of running out of time, so I'll leave that for others to touch on. But just important to note, because one of the things that we've done, especially with the unit token itself, is rather than just making a token, we thought we would actually be wise to use this mechanism of the treasury for the unit token itself. So all of the token sales that happen, basically 90% of all the crypto that's used to purchase unit gets locked into the unit treasury. So here we can see that the unit token currently is supported by the likes of Bitcoin, BNB, Polkadot, Ethereum, Cardano, Matic, Solana, et cetera, et cetera. And so this way, the unit token itself actually has a floor. And so anyone that holds the token, if they wish to at some point, they can go and redeem, effectively burn their tokens in the treasury, and they are then able to withdraw their portion of the value held. And so this same mechanism then kicks on for the stable tokens as well, which are backed by crypto. The city and industry tokens, which are again backed by stable tokens and also by the unit token. And then agency and fund tokens, which will be sort of part of the same package as unit ventures, wherein there'll be an opportunity for community members or for entrepreneurial individuals to basically create their own agencies that help tokens to launch. So if I have to give an example, it might be like what a record label is to a band. Again, you know, like it's kind of this place where they understand the industry very well. You can go there, you get support, you get funding, you can get all of this kind of stuff. And then the very top level, very high level token is of course going to be the individual and the business tokens. Just going to try and shield that, that's better. Fabulous. And so Unit Network as a DAO is currently operating all over the world. So we've got hubs in New York, which is probably our main hub at this point in time. We've got Zurich, we've got Munich, we've got Dubai, and we've got Singapore, and then we've got Indonesia, which is where we were based for the most time sort of like building this platform. A lot of the team were stuck in Bali during, or I shouldn't say stuck, were happily in Bali during COVID, building the project and doing a lot of the sort of development that was happening in the early stages. But it's just important to note because I think what we're also pioneering is how to actually build a DAO. And a lot of what we're really a lot of what we're learning and a lot of the experiences that we're having, we're actually able to then pass on to different users, say within the Launchpad or whatever. Because I think right now there's a very heavy emphasis or a need on actually building a playbook, so to speak, for all of the different industries, the different cities, that are looking at actually tokenizing and the do's and the don'ts and the valuable things to be taken from all of the different ecosystems that have actually engaged on these journeys as well. And so to wrap up, I think I made this tweet a few weeks ago, but I think this still resonates with me very, very deeply because as I've touched on a few times before, what the most important thing is it's not really just about the blockchain technology. It's what the blockchain technology allows us to sort of facilitate and improve upon. And therefore, it's actually about the people that it unites. You know, like Bitcoin would be still a very cool innovation, but if it didn't have a community around it, if there was no ecosystem, anyone would be hard pressed to convince me as to why it actually has value. And so culture as well, things like music, things like film, sports, are all actually becoming asset classes in the world of Web3, where people can actually be tokenizing themselves or tokenizing their businesses and actually allowing the communities to really get involved with what they're doing This also then happens on a global scale because it's kind of creating a borderless business, a borderless economy of sorts. And we really care because we do all favor honest connection, belonging, and purpose. And this is really what communities inspire at their absolute core, is it gives us a sort of like, it gives us a home, it gives us a reason for kind of waking up in the morning, and it gives us, yeah, this true sense of belonging. And to me, this is really important. And I think that DAOs are going to really start to heavily emphasize this kind of behavior as well, because we can really start to see enormous success and growth and progress coming from this sort of honest collaboration, and the transparency that actually comes from the use of tokens as well, and blockchains all go to just augment this innovation in a very, very good way. So if you want to get in touch with us, or even me, you can reach out to me on Twitter or Telegram, or we can actually have a chat even after I finished up here in a second. Be more than happy to. But you can also follow Unit on our Telegram or Discord, YouTube, Twitter, you know, all the usual stuff. But yeah, I'll leave it there for you guys. And I think I'm just hitting my time now, so that will be good. I'm sorry if I raced through that a little bit. But yeah, any questions, please take it away.
Thank you, Thorne. In time, I mean, like spot on. And thank you for sharing. And if there's any questions, you can either put them in the chat. We'll convert them later on to Thorne. I think you got to go. You have a gig right now happening in Tallinn.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Well, we're actually a little bit out of Tallinn. We're in the beautiful nature. Honestly, I'm so impressed by this country. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'll be on stage in about 2 hours. But nevertheless, I'm still happy to answer questions if anyone has them.
Great. Good luck.